When asked about Donald Trump's true character, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt didn't hesitate. She called him a leader with a big heart. But what exactly did she mean, and why is this statement sparking so much conversation right now? Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. When Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in American history, stepped up to the podium, nobody expected what was about to happen. The press room, buzzing with tension, had grown used to sharp exchanges, rapid-fire questions, and carefully scripted political responses. Reporters leaned forward, cameras clicked in rapid bursts, and the nation tuned in for what they assumed would be another heated briefing. But instead of political sparring or policy updates, Karoline delivered words that stunned everyone in the room. She described Donald Trump not just as a politician, not just as a former president, but, most unexpectedly, as a man with, in her words, a big heart. The reaction was immediate. Eyebrows raised. Journalists whispered to one another. It wasn't the kind of statement anyone was expecting. After all, Trump's public image has long been painted as tough, unfiltered, and often divisive. Yet here was Leavitt, standing before the world, pulling back the curtain on a side of Trump that, according to her, few had truly seen. A bold statement in a divided world. In today's political climate, every word spoken from the White House podium carries weight. And when Karoline Leavitt, barely in her late 20s and already holding one of the most powerful communication roles in America, made that declaration, it was like a lightning strike. Critics were quick to dismiss it as political loyalty. Supporters, on the other hand, saw it as a refreshing reminder that behind every leader, no matter how controversial, there is a human being. Social media exploded with reactions. Some praised Leavitt for showing courage in humanizing a man often portrayed in extreme terms, while others accused her of spinning a narrative to soften Trump's image. But here's the question everyone was asking. What exactly did she mean? Was this simply a defense of her boss? Or was Karoline revealing something genuine, something that might reshape how people think of Trump's character? Beyond the public persona. For years, Trump has been seen as a man of business deals, bold statements, and unyielding stances. His speeches are fiery. His tweets once dominated headlines, and his critics often describe him as brash and uncompromising. But Karoline's words suggested there's more to the story. She pointed to moments the cameras rarely captured, moments when Trump offered private encouragement to struggling staffers, when he took extra time to listen to the stories of everyday Americans, or when he quietly extended help without the spotlight. According to Karoline, these were the moments that revealed the big heart behind the larger-than-life persona. And it wasn't just about compassion in personal interactions. She hinted that Trump's drive to fight for working-class families, his insistence on putting America first, and his willingness to challenge the status quo all stem from a deep sense of care for the country and its people. Why her words mattered. The reason Karoline's statement carried so much power wasn't just because of what she said, but who she is. At just 27 years old, she made history as the youngest person ever to serve as White House press secretary. For someone so young to step onto the national stage and deliver such a bold characterization of one of the most polarizing figures in American politics, it made people listen. Her words mattered because they cut through the noise of political spin and offered a glimpse into a more personal perspective. She wasn't quoting policy. She wasn't dodging questions. She was sharing what she claimed to have seen firsthand. A leader whose humanity was often overshadowed by headlines. The bigger picture. Whether people agreed with her or not, Karoline's statement sparked an important conversation. Can a leader be both tough and compassionate? Can someone known for sharp rhetoric still be guided by a big heart? For supporters, her words reinforced what they already believed, that Trump, despite his flaws, genuinely cares about the American people. For critics, it raised skepticism, but also curiosity. Was there truth to this side of the story that they had overlooked? In the end, Karoline Leavitt did more than just defend her boss that day. She reminded the world that leadership isn't only about power, policies, or politics. It's also about humanity. And in a time when division dominates headlines, her portrayal of Trump as a man with a big heart was a bold, unexpected, and unforgettable moment. History will continue to debate Donald Trump's presidency, his policies, and his impact on America. But what Karoline Leavitt revealed that day was something deeper, a reminder that even the most controversial leaders are still people, capable of compassion, care, and yes, heart. Her words might not change every mind, but they did something rare in today's world. They made people pause, reflect, and look beyond the headlines. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what she intended. To understand the weight of Karoline Leavitt's words, you first have to understand who she is. At just 27 years old, Karoline has already made history as the youngest White House press secretary in American history. That alone would be enough to set her apart. But her journey to this role tells an even more powerful story. Karoline didn't grow up in privilege. She was raised in a modest New Hampshire family where hard work wasn't just expected. It was a way of life. From a young age, she dreamed big, determined to make her mark in politics. And she wasn't afraid of the grind. She interned, networked, and proved herself, eventually landing a role as an assistant press secretary in Donald Trump's White House. That was the first step in what would become a meteoric rise. But her path wasn't smooth. Being young in politics can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gives you energy, drive, and the ability to connect with a new generation of voters. On the other, it makes you a target for doubt, dismissal, and skepticism. Karoline faced all of that head-on. She was underestimated, criticized, and at times even mocked. Yet she kept going, determined not just to belong in Washington, but to make an impact. The leap into the spotlight. After her initial White House role, Karoline didn't disappear into the background like so many young staffers do. Instead, she made the bold decision to run for Congress in New Hampshire. While she didn't win, the campaign itself proved something important. She had the courage to put her name, her face, and her beliefs directly before the public. She wasn't just defending Trump behind a podium anymore. She was stepping into the political arena herself. The loss didn't break her. If anything, it sharpened her skills and strengthened her resolve. She reemerged as one of the most recognizable voices in Trump's 2024 campaign, quickly building a reputation as a fierce defender of the former president and his policies. Every time she spoke on television or in interviews, her energy and conviction stood out. She wasn't just repeating talking points. She was speaking with conviction. And that's why, when she stepped into the role of White House press secretary, her words carried weight. She wasn't just another political spokesperson reading from a binder. She was someone who had fought battles, taken hits, and earned her place. Why her words on Trump shocked people. So when Karoline stood at the podium and described Donald Trump as a man with a big heart, the statement didn't feel like empty praise. It came from someone who had been in the room, who had seen the man behind the headlines. Critics, of course, were quick to roll their eyes. They claimed she was simply trying to soften Trump's image or appeal to undecided voters. But supporters pointed out the obvious. Karoline had worked closely with Trump for years. If anyone could speak to his character off camera, it was her. She wasn't describing the Trump you see in rallies or on television. She was talking about the Trump who privately checked in on his staffers, who offered encouragement when the cameras weren't rolling, who took time to listen to the struggles of everyday people who came to him for help. According to Karoline, these were the moments that revealed the heart behind the headlines. And that's what made her words so powerful. She wasn't painting Trump as flawless. She was showing that even one of the most polarizing figures in modern history had a side that most people never get to see. The pressure she faces. Of course, making such bold statements comes with consequences. Karoline has faced relentless criticism, not just for defending Trump, but for being so young while doing it. Political opponents dismiss her as inexperienced. Journalists often press her harder than they would someone older, testing her every word. But each time, she shows the same determination that brought her to this point. Her toughness doesn't mean she's blind to the challenges. In fact, it's part of what makes her words resonate. She knows how divided the country is. She knows that praising Trump in such personal terms will draw fire. Yet she does it anyway. That courage in itself has made her one of the most talked about rising stars in politics today. Why it matters. At the end of the day, Karoline Leavitt's story is bigger than one press briefing. It's about a young woman who rose from modest beginnings, fought her way into the halls of power, and refused to be silenced by criticism. And it's about the way her words, simple, direct, and personal, can shift the conversation. When she said Trump has a big heart, she wasn't just offending him. She was challenging the nation to look beyond the headlines, the sound bites, and the social media debates. She was offering a glimpse into the human side of a man most people think they already know. Whether you agree with her or not, one thing is clear. Karoline Leavitt isn't just a spokesperson. She's shaping the narrative of a political movement. And for someone only 27 years old, that's not just remarkable, it's historic. So, what moments could Karoline Leavitt be referring to when she described Donald Trump as a man with a big heart? For many, the public image of Trump is defined by fiery speeches, tough negotiations, and headline-grabbing controversies. But according to people who have worked closely with him, there is another side, one rarely captured by cameras and almost never reported on the evening news. Karoline's words hinted at a collection of stories and private gestures that reveal a more human side of the former president. These are the moments you'll find in political debates or campaign rallies. Instead, they are quiet interactions, often hidden from the spotlight, where Trump's softer qualities come through. Private calls that lasted hours. One of the clearest examples comes from his time as president. Staffers recall occasions when Trump personally called the families of fallen soldiers. While many presidents make such calls as part of their duty, what stood out about Trump was the time he spent on them. Rather than sticking to a scripted message of condolence, he would often remain on the line for hours, listening as grieving families shared stories of their loved ones. He didn't rush through the conversation. He didn't delegate it to someone else. In those moments, he was not the commander-in-chief on television. He was simply a man, trying to comfort parents, spouses, and children who had lost everything. These calls rarely made headlines because they weren't designed for publicity. But to the families who received them, they revealed a president willing to share in their grief, even if the rest of the world never knew. Quiet acts of generosity. There are also stories of Trump's generosity toward those around him, acts that never made it to the press briefings or campaign ads. One such story involves a staff member whose child faced a sudden and costly medical emergency. Without hesitation, Trump stepped in and paid the bills himself, asking for no recognition in return. It wasn't about politics or popularity. It was about helping someone in need simply because he could. Then there were the countless employees, many of them not high-ranking officials, but support staff working behind the scenes of the White House, who received personal thank-you notes and holiday gifts directly from him. Trump, known publicly as a billionaire businessman, still took the time to make those working around him feel noticed and appreciated. For Karoline Leavitt, who worked closely in Trump's orbit, these were the kinds of moments that shaped her perspective. They weren't designed for the cameras, and that's exactly why they stood out. The man behind the bold image. Of course, Trump's public persona is almost the opposite of these quiet gestures. On stage, he is bold, brash, and often combative. His critics focus on the sharp language, the controversial comments, and the relentless way he goes after his opponents. And for many Americans, that's the only side of him they believe exists. But Karoline wanted people to understand that leaders, especially one as larger-than-life as Donald Trump, are often more complex than the image we see on television. Yes, he's a fighter. Yes, he projects toughness. But beneath that exterior, she says, is a man who values loyalty, family, and compassion. To her, the big heart she spoke of isn't just about personal kindness. It's also about the way Trump sees his role in the bigger picture. She has often pointed out that his fight for policies, whether on the economy, immigration, or foreign relations, stems from a belief that he is protecting American families. To Trump, politics isn't just about power. It's about caring for the people who place their trust in him. Why these stories matter. The reason Karoline's words struck such a chord is because they challenge the narrative most people are familiar with. For years, critics have painted Trump as cold, ruthless, and self-serving. But these behind-the-scenes stories, if true, suggest something far more complicated: a leader who, while tough in public, has shown private acts of compassion. For his supporters, these stories are a reminder of why they trust him. For his critics, they may be harder to believe. But whether you see them as political spin or genuine truth, one fact is undeniable. Karoline Leavitt was not speaking as a distant commentator. She was speaking as someone who had seen these moments firsthand. Her words carried weight because they offered a glimpse behind the curtain into the personal interactions that don't trend on Twitter or get reported in headlines. And in today's world of endless division and cynicism, that glimpse felt both surprising and significant. At the podium, when Karoline called Trump a man with a big heart, she wasn't just offering a flattering soundbite. She was sharing stories that, if remembered, could reshape how people view one of the most controversial figures in modern history. The personal calls, the private generosity, the quiet thank yous, these are the moments she wanted people to consider. And whether or not you agree with her, those moments remind us of a truth often forgotten in politics. Leaders are human beings with flaws, strengths, and, sometimes, a heart bigger than anyone expected. But why now? Why would Karoline Leavitt choose this exact moment to highlight Donald Trump's softer side? The answer may lie in the intersection of politics, perception, and timing. With the upcoming election on the horizon, every word, every image, and every story shared about Trump matters more than ever. For years, Trump has been seen as the strong businessman, the deal-maker, the straight-talker who doesn't sugarcoat his opinions. Supporters love that about him. They admire his boldness, his refusal to bow to political correctness, and his willingness to fight for what he believes in. But for others, those same qualities are what push them away. They see the bluntness as harsh, the confidence as arrogance, and the toughness as a lack of compassion. Karoline's statement that Trump has a big heart isn't just about defending her boss. It's about reshaping that narrative. It's about reminding people that behind the bold speeches and fiery debates, there is still a human being who can be kind, empathetic, and deeply caring. A strategic but humanizing move. In today's political climate, people are craving authenticity. Voters don't just want leaders who know policy or command authority. They want leaders who feel real, leaders who can show vulnerability, compassion, and humanity. That's where Karoline's words come in. By sharing stories and perspectives that highlight Trump's softer side, she is creating a more balanced picture of him. It's not about replacing his strong image. It's about adding another layer to it. It's about saying, yes, he's tough, yes, he's bold, but he's also someone who cares about people on a personal level. This shift matters because campaign ads filled with statistics and policy points rarely touch people's hearts. What resonates are stories. A personal call to a grieving family, a quiet act of generosity, a kind word to a staff member. These are the things that make a leader relatable. Karoline's words provide those stories, and in doing so, they invite Americans to see Trump not just as a political figure, but as a person. The power of perception. In politics, perception often shapes reality. A single phrase can change how people view a candidate. For Trump, being known as the fighter has always been part of his brand. But for undecided voters, that toughness can sometimes feel distant or intimidating. By calling him a man with a big heart, Karoline isn't taking away his strength. She's complementing it with compassion. She's reframing him as a leader who is not only capable of making hard decisions, but also capable of empathy. That combination is powerful. Think about it. Most Americans don't just want a president who can negotiate deals. They want a leader who understands their struggles, who cares about their families, who feels their pain. Karoline's words tap directly into that desire. Karoline as the messenger. It's also important to remember who's delivering this message. Karoline herself is a symbol of change in politics. At just 27 years old, she is young, energetic, and unafraid to take bold stances. She represents a new generation of voices in the Republican Party, voices that can connect with younger voters who may have never seen themselves reflected in Trump's movement. When Karoline speaks about Trump's heart, it feels fresh. It doesn't sound like an old talking point repeated by a seasoned politician. Instead, it comes from someone who has worked closely with him, who has seen him off camera, and who is willing to vouch for his character. That authenticity makes her message more believable and more impactful. Her words act like a bridge. On one side is Trump's existing base, people who already admire his toughness. On the other are undecided voters, younger Americans, and skeptics who might be open to a different perspective. Karoline's message connects the two, softening his image without changing who he is at the core. The bigger picture. So why now? Because timing is everything. As the election approaches, every candidate is working to define themselves in the minds of voters. For Trump, the challenge isn't about proving he's strong. People already know that. The challenge is about showing that his strength doesn't come at the expense of compassion. By highlighting his big heart, Karoline Leavitt is filling in the missing piece of the puzzle. She's reminding voters that Trump isn't just a fighter. He's also someone who cares deeply about people, someone who can show kindness, and someone who, in her words, values loyalty, family, and compassion. In a time when Americans are hungry for leaders who feel authentic and human, that message could make all the difference. Karoline Leavitt's choice to spotlight Trump's softer side isn't accidental. It's a carefully timed move, but also a deeply personal one. It's about reshaping public perception, bridging divides, and reminding the country that leadership is not just about policies and power. It's also about heart. And perhaps that's the point. In a world of sound bites and headlines, sometimes the most powerful thing a leader, or their spokesperson, can do is remind people of their humanity. By the end of that press conference, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt had started a new conversation. Her praise of Donald Trump's character wasn't just a headline to be forgotten after the next news cycle. It was a spark that made people pause, debate, and reconsider the way they see one of the most polarizing figures in modern politics. When she stood at the podium and described Trump as a man with a big heart, the words were simple. But the reaction they created was anything but. Social media lit up. News outlets scrambled to analyze what she meant. Supporters felt validated, critics were caught off guard, and undecided voters suddenly had a new perspective to think about. For supporters, a reminder of why they trust him. For Trump supporters, Karoline's statement was more than just a compliment. It was a reminder. They've always admired his boldness, his willingness to fight against the establishment, and his ability to make promises and deliver on them. But Karoline brought something else into focus: humanity. Supporters pointed to stories of Trump quietly helping employees, writing personal thank you notes, or making long condolence calls to grieving families. These weren't things people saw on television, but they matched the picture Karoline was painting. To them, her words confirmed what they had always believed. Trump isn't just tough, he cares. This reminder matters because campaigns aren't won by policies alone. They're won by connection. Supporters now had a fresh reason to rally behind him, not just because they agreed with his vision for America, but because they felt they could trust the man behind the vision. For critics, a challenge to rethink the narrative. For Trump's critics, the reaction was more complicated. Many dismissed Karoline's words as strategic spin. They argued it was an attempt to soften Trump's image ahead of the election, a calculated move to appeal to undecided voters. But whether they admitted it or not, Karoline's words planted a seed of doubt. Could it be possible that the man they saw as brash and uncompromising also had a softer side? Could the public image of Trump, the fighter, the disruptor, the headline maker, be only part of the story? Even for critics unwilling to change their minds, the statement forced a pause. And sometimes in politics, that pause is powerful. It disrupts the narrative. It forces people to confront the possibility that things may be more complex than they thought. The power of perspective. That's what Karoline's press conference ultimately revealed. The power of perspective. Two people can see the same leader and walk away with completely different views. Some will always see Trump as a businessman who turned politics upside down. Others will always see him as a divisive figure. But through Karoline's eyes, people were offered a different angle. Trump as a leader with a heart. Perspective doesn't erase facts. It doesn't change history, but it does shape how people interpret both. When Karoline said Trump has a big heart, she wasn't rewriting his record. She was reframing it. She was saying, yes, he is strong. Yes, he is bold. But he is also compassionate, loyal, and deeply human. And that perspective, whether you agree with it or not, resonated. It reminded everyone that leaders are not just symbols of power. They are people with complexities, contradictions, and unexpected qualities. More than just politics. Ultimately, what made Karoline's words so striking was that they transcended politics. This wasn't about tax policy, foreign relations, or campaign strategy. It was about character. It was about heart. In an era where political discourse often feels cold and combative, hearing a press secretary speak about kindness, loyalty, and compassion felt unusual, and maybe even refreshing. It cut through the noise and reminded people that leadership isn't only about strategy or strength. Sometimes it's about humanity. And if Karoline's words are true, then Trump isn't just a leader with bold ideas and unfiltered speeches. He is also a leader capable of empathy, compassion, and heart. That doesn't mean his critics will forgive his controversies, nor does it mean his supporters will stop admiring his toughness. But it does mean the story of Donald Trump is more layered than many are willing to admit. By the end of that press conference, Karoline Leavitt had done something rare. She had shifted the conversation, not by unveiling a new policy, not by delivering a fiery rebuttal, but by offering a glimpse into the personal side of a man often defined by his public battles. For some, her words were a reminder of why they already trust him. For others, they were a challenge to look again. But for everyone, they highlighted an undeniable truth: perspective matters. Sometimes, leadership isn't measured only by strength, strategy, or success. Sometimes, it's measured by heart. And if what Karoline Leavitt says is true, then Donald Trump isn't just a leader with bold ideas. He's a leader with a big heart. So what do you think? Was Karoline Leavitt right to call Donald Trump a leader with a big heart? Or was it just political spin? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.